Hey guys. All right. Today I want to tackle a question that I didn't even know was a thing until after I lost Libby. And that question is, what is the difference between grief and mourning? At first, I thought they were interchangeable words used to describe that soul crushing feeling after a big loss. But the more I learned and the more I dealt with the feelings in my own loss, the more I realized how important the distinction between the two is. And spoiler alert, understanding the difference can actually really help you in your own healing process. So stay with me and we'll figure out the difference between grief and mourning. Stay tuned. Okay, so first, what is the difference between grief and mourning? The way that I have come to understand it in the most simplistic terms is this: grief is what is happening inside you, it's the internal storm, the anger, the sadness, the desperation, and whatever else you feel when you've lost someone you love. Mourning, on the other hand, is how you express that grief outwardly. It's essentially what you do to share your grief with the outside world, whether that is crying or talking about your loss or participating in cultural or religious rituals, or even something as simple as wearing black. In short, grief is the raw internal emotion, and mourning is how we give it a voice. Okay, so why does this distinction even matter? I think the difference is important because I feel like a lot of people are grieving, but not necessarily mourning. I feel like in Western cultures, especially, people are drowning in grief on the inside, but they don't really know how to express it. And it's hard because there is no clear way to grieve or express that grief. There is no roadmap for how to deal with it. And many of us don't have cultural rituals that we follow. With Libby, I planned a big, beautiful funeral that was amazing, but then it was just silence. And within a matter of days or weeks, if you're lucky, you're expected to go back to work and buck up and carry on and try not to be an emotional disaster that is crying at your job and making other people uncomfortable. Going through this myself is how I learned that hard truth that grief needs to be expressed, which is the mourning part. Our loved ones need to be mourned. And if we don't find ways to mourn, that grief stays bottled up inside. And trust me, eventually that shaken bottle is going to explode. Obviously, this is not everyone's experience. And one of the most fascinating things that I've learned about mourning is how much it varies depending on where you're from. In some cultures, mourning is loud and communal. There are wailing ceremonies, weeks of meals, or an entire village comes together to carry the weight of the loss. In others, it is quiet and private. The focus is on keeping those emotions subdued and moving forward as quickly as possible. Here in the US, I feel like mourning feels so rushed. There is a lot of pressure to get back to quote unquote normal, to put on a brave face and just keep trudging forward. But when you lose someone that is so important to you that it is just a soul crushing blow, that is so hard. So after trying to bottle things up and be brave and be strong, and after a while, I learned that I had to create my own ways of mourning my daughter so that honestly, I didn't completely lose my shit. So, for example, I started a blog and started writing about how I was feeling and posting it. I started talking about Libby and sharing her story with you guys. I created rituals. Some are big, like we just had the anniversary of her death and we paint rocks. Some of them, we paint rocks with things that she loved and we hide them on trails in our area for people to find to bring them joy. We go to the Olive Garden because it's her favorite restaurant, and if we don't go to the Olive Garden, we make noodles because noodles are her favorite food. And sometimes they are the small things, like how I set aside a day every now and then to just look at her pictures and watch videos of her and hear her voice and just sob because I miss her so much. These aren't traditional cultural rituals, but they've helped me to mourn and to process my grief. I feel like we have to learn to be creative to mourn in our modern world, because one of the biggest challenges is that mourning often doesn't have a place in our busy society. Most of us don't get extended bereavement leave. And let's be honest, social media kind of pushes us to only show people our highlight reel and not the reality of what we're feeling. Somehow, in our crazy digital world, we need to find a way to get those feelings from the inside out. That is how we heal. So if you feel like you are not mourning, you're grieving, but you're not mourning, here are a couple suggestions that I have for you. First, try creating a ritual. I told you some of mine, but it can be things as simple as lighting a candle in honor of your loved one. It can be visiting a special place that reminds you of them or that they loved. You can write a letter to your loved one. You can get together with people who also loved your person and just share stories and memories. And speaking of sharing stories, that's my next suggestion. Share your person's story. You can talk to friends, you can talk to family members, you can join an online group, you can visit an in-person grief group, you can post online anonymously to the world. Just get your person's story out there. The third idea, try honoring their memory in a tangible way. This could be something like making their favorite recipe, donating to a cause that reminds you of your person or something that they thought was important, keeping a particular tradition alive that your person loved. Mourning doesn't necessarily have to be public, it just has to be expressed. So if you're more private, you can find quiet ways to let that grief out. Things like writing, journaling, drawing, any kind of art, making pottery. Those things are great ways to express your grief that don't require you to be vocal. Looking back, I really wish that someone had told me sooner that grief is inevitable and it's all consuming. Mourning is a choice, and making sure that you're mourning is a much healthier way to deal with grief. So if you're grieving, ask yourself, how am I mourning? Are you letting your loss out into the world, even in small ways? Are you giving yourself permission to feel it out loud? It's not always easy. And as always in grief, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Finding your way, whether it is loud and messy or quiet and reserved, it's one of the most healing things you can do. If you have found meaningful ways to mourn, I would love to hear what they are in the comments. So please share with me, and let's inspire others to grieve and mourn and honor our loved ones in ways that feel right to us. And if you are looking for more in depth with your healing, I just want to remind you about my book, Grief Sucks, But Your Life Doesn't Have to, where I chronicle my journey and the things that have helped me through the loss in my life, especially of my 10-year-old daughter, Libby. That is available on Amazon, and I will leave a link in the description. All right, until next week, sending love and hugs. Bye, guys.